Jamal Carter was the brilliant mind behind the decade's biggest tech merger. But behind closed doors, he was just a black widower trying to keep the lights on and his little girl fed. One rainy Tuesday, pushed past his limit, he fired off an email he was sure would end his career. He braced himself for impact. Instead, 3 hours later, Serafina Sterling, the most feared CEO in Seattle, was standing on his front porch. She wasn't there to accept his resignation. This is the story of how a black single dad's total breakdown ended up changing everything. The coffee in Jamal Carter's mug had gone cold. It had been sitting there for 3 hours, a stagnant pool of black sludge that matched the heaviness in his chest. It was 4:17 a.m. in Seattle. Outside the bay window of his cramped rented Craftsman on Queen Anne Hill, the rain was merciless. It wasn't a gentle drizzle. It pounded the roof in a relentless rhythm, the kind of storm that seeped into your bones and made you wonder if the sun had simply given up on the Pacific Northwest. Inside, the only light came from the dual monitors of his home setup. Lines of Go and Rust blurred together into a neon headache. "Daddy!" The voice was tiny, scratchy, and terrifying. Jamal spun his chair around so fast the wheels snagged on the worn rug. Zuri, his 6-year-old daughter, stood in the doorway. Her tight coils were flattened on one side from sleep. She clutched Mr. Hops, a rabbit plush with one ear hanging by a thread, and her rich brown cheeks were flushed a worrying shade of red. "Little bit," Jamal whispered, abandoning the merger code in an instant. He crossed the room in 2 strides and dropped to one knee. "What's wrong, honey?" "A bad dream. My throat hurts," she rasped. "And I'm hot." He pressed the back of his hand to her forehead. Her skin was burning. A cold, familiar panic spiked in his chest. This was the 3rd time this month. Strep, flu, or just the wear and tear of being a kid whose dad was physically in the house but mentally chained to a server rack. "Okay," Jamal said, his voice shaking just a little. "Okay, we'll get you some Tylenol and back to bed, yeah?" He scooped her up. She felt lighter than she should have. His phone buzzed on the desk. Then again, and again. The vibration rattled against the oak veneer like a drill. He glanced at the screen. "Serafina Sterling, CEO. Where is the encryption key for the Vanguard port?" "Serafina Sterling, CEO. Miller, if this isn't uploaded by 6 a.m. AST, the deal dies. Serafina Sterling, CEO. Answer me." He stared at the phone, then at his daughter, whimpering into his shoulder, her heat bleeding through his t-shirt. As a black single dad in his 30s, Jamal had gotten used to juggling crisis on top of crisis, but tonight, the math simply didn't work. He thought about the last 3 years since his wife Sarah died in that car accident on I-5. He'd been running a marathon at sprint speed ever since, lead systems architect at Sterling Dynamics, good salary, health insurance. Lucky, people said. Lucky. Lucky while he missed Zuri's first ballet recital because of a server crash. Lucky when he skipped her parent-teacher conference because Serafina demanded a Sunday debrief. Lucky while he paid a nanny he barely liked more than he paid in rent, just so he could work 18-hour days for a woman who treated employees like defective appliances. "Daddy, the phone is loud," Zuri murmured into his neck. "I know, baby, I know." He carried her to her room, tucked her under the unicorn comforter, and measured out the medicine. He sat on the edge of her bed, gently stroking her tight curls until her breathing evened out. He looked up at the glow-in-the-dark stars Sarah had stuck to the ceiling 4 years ago. Some of them were peeling, hanging at odd angles. "I can't do this," he realized. It wasn't a shout. It was a quiet truth, dropping into place like a stone. I literally cannot do this anymore. He walked back to his tiny office, sat down, opened his email. He didn't draft a 2-week notice. He didn't dress it up as seeking new opportunities. He typed, "To Serafina Sterling, HR, Board of Directors. Subject, immediate resignation. I quit. The encryption key is in the secure repository under folder Project Icarus. The password is the date my wife died, because that was the only day I took off in 5 years, and you called me 4 times during the funeral. I am done choosing you over my daughter. Don't contact me. Jamal Carter." He hit send. For a full minute, he just stared at the screen. The terror arrived first. Healthcare, rent, groceries. but it was swallowed by a wave of relief so strong it almost made him laugh. He closed the laptop, pulled the router's plug from the wall. Then he walked into the living room, dropped onto the lumpy sofa, and for the first time in years, fell asleep without setting an alarm. The pounding wasn't part of a dream. Jamal jolted awake. The room was washed in gray, late morning light. The rain hadn't stopped. It had doubled down into a solid sheet. Thud, thud, thud. Someone was trying to break down his front door. He scrambled up, scrubbing a hand over his face. His watch read 10:15 a.m. Zuri was still asleep. The fever must have knocked her out. Adrenaline surged as he moved toward the door. He grabbed a baseball bat from the umbrella stand, a Louisville Slugger he'd bought for safety, but mostly used to smack cobwebs off the porch lights. "Who is it?" he called, leaving the deadbolt firmly in place. "Open the damn door, Carter!" The voice was female, sharp as broken glass, imperial and impatient. It was the voice that cut men to ribbons in boardrooms 40 floors up. Jamal froze. No way. He cracked the door, leaving the safety chain hooked. Standing on his rotting wooden porch, rain pouring off the brim of a trench coat that probably cost more than his entire car, was Serafina Sterling. She was terrifyingly beautiful, even soaked. Her jet black hair clung to her pale skin, exaggerating the slice of her cheekbones and the frost of her ice blue eyes. Behind her, a black Mercedes Maybach idled in his driveway, hazard lights blinking in the gray. "You unplugged your phone," she said. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. "I quit," Jamal replied, his voice rough. "Didn't you get the email? It was pretty clear." "Open the door, Carter, now." No." He tightened his grip on the bat. "Go away. I'm not an employee of Sterling Dynamics anymore. This is trespassing." "The encryption key didn't work," she snapped, stepping closer to the crack. Jamal frowned. "Yes, it did. October 14th, 10:14. It locked the system," she hissed, voice rising. "The merger is stalled. The stock dropped 12% in pre-market trading. Vanguard Systems is circling like a shark. If you don't fix this, I don't just lose the merger, Carter. I lose the company." "Not my problem," Jamal said, and started to shut the door. Serafina slammed her hand against the wood. It had to hurt, but she didn't flinch. "I will sue you for breach of contract, negligence, and corporate sabotage," she snarled. "I will bury you in so much litigation, you won't be able to afford a goldfish, let alone raise a child." That landed. Anger flared in Jamal's chest, hot and clean. He unhooked the chain and yanked the door open. "You want to talk about my child?" he shouted, stepping out onto the porch in his socks. "My daughter has a fever of 103. I am done with your threats, Sarah. You want the code? Fine, come in. I'll type it in, then you get the hell out of my house." For a split second, she looked stunned. She wasn't used to being yelled at. She was used to, "Yes, Miss Sterling," and "Right away, Miss Sterling." She stepped in, shaking off the rain like an offended cat. Her heels clicked across the scuffed floor as she took in the living room. Toys everywhere, laundry folded but not put away on a chair, half-eaten toast on the coffee table. The air smelled like Vicks VapoRub and stale coffee. It was the opposite of her chrome and glass penthouse in downtown Seattle, all white leather, sharp edges, and silence. "Computers this way," Jamal muttered, heading toward his office. She followed, shoes tapping on the hardwood. "You live like this?" she asked, nose wrinkling. "It's called a home, Sarah." He dropped into his desk chair. "You should try it sometime." He booted the rig and plugged the internet back in. Notifications flooded the screen. Hundreds of missed calls, Slack pings, panicked emails from the dev team. He ignored them all and pulled up the terminal. "October 14th, he murmured, fingers flying as he typed 10142021. Access denied. Jamal's brow creased. He tried again. 2012111014. Access denied. "Ah, I told you," Sarah said, standing just behind him. He could smell her perfume, expensive and cold like jasmine caught in winter air. "You changed it last week during the security patch update." His mind raced back over the sleepless nights. He'd been awake for 48 hours straight patching the kernel. I don't remember," he admitted. "Excuse me?" Her voice went quiet in a way that was more dangerous than yelling. "I was up for 2 days, Jamal said, rubbing his temples. "I don't remember what I set the failsafe to." "Figure it out," she ordered. Vanguard's CEO, Arthur Vance, is calling an emergency board vote at noon to oust me. If I don't have control of the IP by then, I'm out. Arthur Vance. Jamal went still. The guy from the Silicon Valley Butcher article? The same, she confirmed. He wants to strip Sterling Dynamics for parts. He'll fire the entire engineering department, including your friends. Jamal groaned. He hated that she was right. He couldn't stand her, but he loved his team. Okay, he said. I need to run a brute force recovery against my local cache to find the keystroke log. It'll take about an hour. Do it, Daddy. The small voice drifted from the hallway. Jamal spun around. Zuri stood there, somehow even smaller than she had at dawn. Her brown skin glistened with sweat. She swayed. I threw up, she whispered. Jamal was on his feet instantly, rushing toward her, but before he could reach her, Zuri's knees buckled. Sarah moved first. For a woman in 4-inch heels, she was shockingly fast. She darted forward and caught Zuri just before she hit the floor, wrapping the girl in her expensive trench coat. She's burning up, Sarah said, eyes wide. For the first time since he'd met her, the Ice Queen mask slipped. She looked genuinely scared. Jamal, she's really hot. I know, he stammered, taking Zuri back into his arms. The heat pouring off her little body made his stomach twist. I need to get her to urgent care. The fever isn't breaking. He glanced at the computer, then at Sarah. I have to go, Jamal said. The code can wait. The company dies at noon, Sarah snapped. My daughter might be dying now, Jamal roared back. The room went heavy and still. Sarah looked at the child sobbing against Jamal's chest, then at Jamal's face, the face of a black father who had already buried a wife and was terrified of losing the only person he had left. She inhaled slowly, then she pulled out her phone. My driver's outside, she said, voice clipped but steady. We take the Maybach. It's faster than whatever rust bucket you drive. You work on the laptop in the car. We're going to Seattle Children's. I know the chief of medicine. I sit on the donor board. We'll get her seen immediately. Jamal stared. You'd do that? I need that code, Carter, she said, not quite meeting his eyes. And you can't type if you're driving. Let's go. The Maybach interior swallowed sound. Only the steady swish of wipers and the frantic clack of Jamal's mechanical keyboard broke the silence. The car tore down I-5, weaving through Seattle traffic with a confidence that said the driver, a huge man Sarah called Oaks, had done more than a few defensive driving courses. Jamal hunched over his laptop, the glow lighting his deep brown face. Zuri lay stretched across the seat between them, head on a pillow Sarah had produced from some hidden compartment. Her breathing was shallow and ragged. 5 minutes to the shareholder meeting, Sarah said. She wasn't looking at him. She stared out at the gray blur of the city, phone gripped like a weapon. Arthur Kane is already in the boardroom. He's telling them I'm incompetent. He's telling them the merger is dead. I'm trying, Jamal snapped without looking up. The brute force algorithm is stalling on the third sector. Someone messed with the kernel. What do you mean? Sarah turned, eyes narrowing. I mean, the password isn't just changed, Jamal said. The whole security architecture got rewritten. This wasn't me, Sarah. I quit. I didn't nuke the system. Someone else was in there around 3 a.m., just before I sent my email. Sarah went very, very still. Seat route 3 a.m., she repeated. You were the only one with level 5 clearance. Me and you, Jamal said. Their eyes locked, tension thick enough to chew. I didn't sabotage my own company, Carter, she said through her teeth. And I didn't either, he shot back. So unless your driver's a secret hacker, we've got a mole. Daddy, Zuri whimpered, stirring. The anger bled out of Jamal in an instant. He dropped one hand from the keyboard to stroke her sweat-damp curls. I'm here, little bit, he murmured. We're almost there. It hurts, she whispered, a tear sliding from the corner of her closed eye. Sarah watched them. She watched his big, work-rough hand cup his daughter's small brown face. She watched the terror hiding under his calm voice. It was a kind of love she'd only ever seen in stories, never in the Sterling household. Her father, the great founder, had adored the stock price. He had never looked at her the way Jamal was looking at his child. Something sharp twisted in her chest. Oaks, Sarah said, voice dropping. Drive faster, use the shoulder. Miss Sterling, that's illegal, the driver rumbled. I'll pay the ticket. Go. The car surged forward. I found it, Jamal whispered suddenly, eyes widening. The intrusion signature. It's from an external IP. They didn't just change the password, they embedded a logic bomb. If I unlock it with the wrong key, it wipes the source code, everything. Can you disarm it? Sarah demanded. I need a root access override, he said. Your biometric key. The car screeched to a stop under the awning of Seattle Children's Hospital's emergency bay. We're here, Oak said. Jamal didn't move. He looked from the laptop to his daughter, torn clean in half. If he stopped now, the company died. If he didn't, Zuri... Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed the laptop and slammed her thumb onto the biometric scanner. Beep, access granted. Fix it, she ordered. Then she flung her door open, ran around, and yanked Jamal's door wide. Before he could react, she unbuckled Zuri and lifted the 6-year-old into her arms. Zuri was dead weight in fevered sleep, but Sarah held her tight against her ruined blouse. Oh, you finished the code! Sarah shouted over the rain, hair instantly soaked. I've got her! Sarah, you don't know her medical history. I know she has a fever and needs a doctor, Sarah yelled back. I'll get her a bed. You save the company so I can afford to pay for it. Run the patch. She turned and sprinted toward the ER doors, heels hammering the wet pavement, carrying his daughter like the most valuable asset on earth. Jamal watched her. Then he looked at the screen. The logic bomb countdown ticked away. He took a breath. Execute restore system Vanguard, he typed. He hit enter. A green bar crawled across the display. System restored. Encryption key reset. He grabbed his phone, dialed into the boardroom conference call just as the clock hit 12 p.m. The motion to remove Serafina Sterling as CEO is on the table, an oily baritone announced. Arthur Kane. She has lost control of the intellectual property. The merger is live, Jamal cut in, his voice shaking with adrenaline. This is Jamal Carter, lead architect. The Vanguard port is open, data is transferring, check your screens. Silence, then a chorus of gasps. It's there, someone muttered. The stock is rebounding. Miss Sterling will be joining you shortly, Jamal lied smoothly. She's handling a critical logistical issue. He hung up, tossed the laptop onto the rich leather seat, and bolted into the hospital. The smell hit him first. Antiseptic and floor wax. It was the scent of the worst day of his life, the day Sarah died. He found them in a private room on the 4th floor. Sarah had kept her word. No sitting in the waiting room, no hours in plastic chairs. Zuri lay in a hospital bed that dwarfed her, wrapped in white sheets. An IV line taped to her small brown hand. The monitor beeped a steady, soothing rhythm. Sarah stood by the window looking out at the gray skyline. Her trench coat hung over a chair to dry. Underneath, her silk blouse was ruined, wrinkled, rain-stained, and Jamal realized with a jolt, marked with a small splash where Zuri had thrown up on her shoulder. She didn't seem to care. Jamal walked to the bed and kissed Zuri's forehead. Cooler now. Pneumonia, he whispered, reading the chart. Bacterial, but they caught it early. The doctor said she'll be fine, Sarah replied without turning. Her voice was soft, stripped of its CEO edge. They've started antibiotics. She just needs rest. Jamal dropped into the plastic chair beside the bed. The adrenaline crash hit like a physical blow. He buried his face in his hands. Thank you, he said hoarsely. Sarah turned. The makeup was smeared under her eyes. For the first time, she looked human. Not a legend, not a headline, just a tired woman. You saved the company, she said. You saved my daughter, Jamal answered. I guess that makes us even. Not even close. A ghost of a smile tugged at her mouth. You resigned, remember? You walked out on me, and yet you still logged into that call. She crossed to the windowsill and sat. Arthur Kane was livid. I checked my messages. He tried to claim the data was corrupted, but the board saw the transfer. He's finished. He's not finished, Jamal said grimly. Sarah, the logic bomb. It had a signature. She went rigid. What kind of signature? It was coded in an old language, Jamal said. Fortran. Nobody uses Fortran anymore unless they've been in this game 40 years. Sarah's face went chalk white. Arthur Kane started as a coder in the 80s, didn't he? He did, she whispered. He was my father's partner before they fell out. He tried to burn the system down from the inside, Jamal said. He wanted you to take the fall. He knew I was burnt out. He knew I was on the edge. He waited for me to crack, then planted the bomb so it would look like some disgruntled employee's revenge. I was the perfect patsy, he added. Sarah stared at him, horror dawning. He used you. He used your grief, your situation with Zuri to steal my father's legacy. She stood abruptly, heading for the door. I'm going to kill him. Wait. Jamal jumped up and blocked the doorway. You can't storm in there. He'll deny everything. He'll clean his tracks. We need proof. I don't have time for proof, she snapped. He's on my board. Sarah, stop. Jamal set his hands on her shoulders. It was the first time he'd ever touched her. Under the ruined silk, she felt too light, vibrating with rage. Look at me. She did. You're smart, he said. Smartest person I know. But right now, you're angry. If you go at him without evidence, he wins. He's been playing this game longer than we've been alive. Her ice blue eyes searched his. Up close, he could see the tiny flecks of gold in them, could feel the heat of her skin against his darker hands. She took an unsteady breath. So what do we do? We work together, Jamal said. I'm not your employee anymore. I'm not doing this for a paycheck. I'm doing it because that man tried to frame me and kept me on a leash while my daughter was getting sicker. So you're retracting your resignation? She asked, and there was the slightest thread of hope in it. No, Jamal said firmly. I'm never working 18-hour days again. I'm never missing another recital. If I come back, it's on my terms, consultant, remote, and if Zuri needs me, I walk, no questions. The old Sarah would have laughed him out of the building. The old Sarah would have fired him twice for saying it. But the old Sarah hadn't just ridden through a storm with a burning hot child in her arms. Deal, she whispered. The moment stretched, charged with more than business. It felt like drawing a line under an old life and writing a new one. Mr. Carter? A nurse poked her head in. Zuri is waking up. She's asking for juice. Jamal broke eye contact and turned to the bed. I'm on it. He moved to his daughter's side. Sarah stayed at the door, watching the two of them. She felt like an intruder in a life she'd never known how to build. She turned to slip out. Sarah, she stopped. Jamal was looking at her over his shoulder. Do you want to grab some coffee? Real coffee? He added. Not that sludge from the break room. There's a spot downstairs. Sarah hesitated. Her inbox was exploding. A war with Arthur Kane was waiting. But the exhaustion in her bones and the look in his eyes pulled harder. I take my coffee black, she said, and I'm buying. 3 days later, Sterling Dynamics' real headquarters might as well have been Jamal's dining room. The table that usually held unpaid bills and crayon drawings was buried in high-end monitors, encrypted servers, and half-empty pizza boxes. Ethernet cables crawled across the floor. The place looked like a startup, and a daycare had collided. Sarah worked there to stay away from Arthur's spies at the office. She perched on one of Jamal's rickety wooden chairs in a cashmere sweater and yoga pants. Clothes Jamal would never have imagined on her. You've got tomato sauce on your chin, he said, not looking up from his screen. I do not, she huffed, swiping at her face with a napkin. I am a precision eater. Right, just like you're a precision parker. You blocked my neighbor's driveway again. His Honda Civic was encroaching on my territory, she sniffed. Jamal chuckled. The sound felt foreign in his own home. Seeing the iron CEO of Sterling Dynamics eating pepperoni pizza and hacking into a shell corporation's database at his scarred table was surreal. But the strangest part wasn't the work. It was Zuri. Back on her feet and buzzing with new energy, she waddled into the kitchen in fuzzy socks, Mr. Hops dangling from one hand. Miss Sarah, she said solemnly. Sarah froze. She was still terrified of breaking the child. Yes, Zuri? Mr. Hops has a loose ear again, Zuri sighed. Daddy can't sew. He makes him look like a Frankenstein bunny. Hey, Jamal protested. That is high-integrity structural stitching. Sarah hesitated, then put down her tablet. She took the rabbit carefully. I took home EC once in boarding school, she said. Her long manicured fingers, more used to signing million-dollar contracts than threading needles, moved with surprising precision as she pulled a needle from Jamal's sewing kit. She worked with the same ruthless focus she used on mergers. There, she said 5 minutes later, handing the plush back. The stitch was invisible. Perfect, Zuri beamed and flung her arms around Sarah's neck. Thank you. Sarah went rigid, eyes wide. Her hands hovered uselessly in the hubcases in the air as she looked to Jamal for rescue. He only leaned against the counter and smiled, arms folded. You can hug her back, you know, he said quietly. She won't bite. Slowly, Sarah lowered her arms and hugged the little girl. Zuri's warm brown cheek pressed into her shoulder. Sarah closed her eyes for a second and exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. When she opened them, she met Jamal's gaze. The vulnerability in her eyes hit him like a punch. Okay, she said, clearing her throat and gently untangling herself from Zuri. Back to work. Did the tracer program finish? Jamal sat down beside her, their knees brushing under the table. The touch sent a distracting spark up his spine. Yeah, it finished. He swiveled the monitor so she could see. Arthur Kane didn't just sabotage the code. He's been siphoning money from the R&D budget for 6 months. It's all going into a shell company called Obsidian Corp. Obsidian? Sarah snorted. That sounds like a villain lair. It gets worse, Jamal said. Look at the IP address on the transfer protocols. She leaned closer, shoulder pressed against his arm. She smelled like rain and vanilla now, not cold jasmine. That IP, she gasped. That's the guest Wi-Fi at the Four Seasons, where Arthur's been camping while his townhouse gets renovated, Jamal said. He's been stealing from you between room service orders. Oh, we have him, Sarah whispered. A fierce, predatory grin spread across her face. This is embezzlement, corporate espionage. We need the full ledger before he realizes we're in his house, Jamal said. Decrypting everything will take all night. Then we stay up all night, Sarah replied. She met his eyes. I'm not going anywhere, Jamal. The air shifted, turning from strictly professional to something charged and fragile. I'll put a pot of coffee on, Jamal murmured, voice low. Good, Sarah said, her gaze dropping to his lips for a fraction of a second. We're going to need the energy. In Seattle, the rain never truly stops. It just changes form. By 2 a.m., it had softened into a steady drumbeat against Jamal's kitchen window. Inside, the war room, formerly known as the dining nook, buzzed with the hum of cooling fans and the sour smell of old pizza. Jamal rubbed his eyes, the blue monitor light burning his retinas. Across the table, Serafina Sterling was fading. She had her legs pulled up on the chair, arms wrapped around her knees. The oversized Sterling Dynamics hoodie he'd lent her swallowed her frame, making the terrifying CEO look more like an exhausted grad student. You're tired, Jamal rasped. Take the couch. I'll watch the brute force script. I'm not tired, she lied, eyelids heavy. I need to see it happen. I want to be awake when we catch him. She reached for her lukewarm coffee, grimaced, and drank it anyway. Tell me something, Jamal said, leaning back in his creaky chair. Why didn't you fire him years ago? Arthur Kane. You knew he was a snake. Sarah traced the rim of her mug with one finger. Because he was my father's friend, she said quietly. When my dad died, Arthur was the one who handed me the flag. He told the board I was ready when everyone else said I was just a nepotism case. I thought... She trailed off, eyes settling on the scarred wood of the table. I thought he was the only family I had left. Jamal studied her. Underneath the couture and the brutal reputation, he saw a woman who was lonelier than anyone he knew. She had money, power, fear, but no one who would show up at 3 a.m. to fix a kid's stuffed rabbit. Family isn't blood, Sarah, he said softly, and it definitely isn't board seats. Family is the people who show up when the fever hits 103. She looked up, her ice blue eyes locked onto his. The data on the screen seemed to fade. How you tried to quit, she whispered. 3 days ago you hated me. I didn't hate you, Jamal corrected. I hated the job. I hated that it took me away from Zuri. But seeing you with her, seeing you here, eating cold pepperoni and hacking a shell corp from my kitchen, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Sarah leaned forward. Her hand slid across the table, hesitated, then brushed his knuckles. Her skin was cool against his warm brown fingers. The tiny contact sent a jolt through him that had nothing to do with electricity. I've never had this, Sarah admitted, voice trembling. A messy kitchen, people, safety. You could, Jamal murmured. The moment hovered, fragile and terrifying. Two people from different worlds colliding over empty coffee cups. Beep. The sharp electronic chirp shattered the spell. Both of them jumped. Jamal spun toward the main monitor. A green bar flashed. Decryption complete, he breathed. We're in. Sarah scrambled off her chair and came to stand beside him, leaning over his shoulder. Her breath stuttered. Show me. Jamal's fingers flew over the keys. Okay, Arthur, let's see where you buried the bodies. He ran the query. The screen filled with cascading bank transfers. Check the dates, Jamal said, pointing. Every time there's a critical security patch that delays a launch, there's a deposit. Obsidian Corp, Sarah read, jaw tightening. Cayman Islands. He's been bleeding us for 18 months. That's $40 million. He wasn't just stealing, Jamal said, scrolling faster. He was shorting the stock. He'd cause a glitch, the stock would dip, he'd buy in low through Obsidian, then sit back while we fixed it. He was literally betting against his own company. Hence, he was betting against me, Sarah said, voice turning to steel. Jamal hit the download key. This is it. Ledger, timestamps, IP, the smoking gun, the bullet, and the fingerprints all in one. Sarah let out a laugh, wild, relieved. Without thinking, she threw her arms around his neck. Jamal's chair spun a little. He reached up, steadying her. For a heartbeat, she ended up in his lap, their faces inches apart. Thank you, she whispered against his forehead. We make a good team, Jamal said, his hands resting lightly on her waist. Maybe we do, she murmured. She didn't move away. They stayed tangled together while the rain whispered outside and the servers hummed around them, breathing the same exhausted air. Eventually, exhaustion won. Sarah's head settled on his shoulder. Jamal rested his chin lightly on her hair. They fell asleep like that, guarding the evidence. The sun didn't bother knocking. It just barged in, turning the kitchen a hazy gray. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the world slick and shining. Jamal woke with a stiff neck and a numb arm. Sarah was still asleep against him, breathing deep and even. In the daylight, she looked younger, the hard edges of her face softened. He didn't want to move. Buzz, buzz, buzz. His phone, face down on the table, started vibrating. Then Sarah's phone chimed from the wall outlet. Then the landline began to ring. Sarah jerked awake. What? What time is it? 7, Jamal said, blinking. Who's calling at... He broke off. His lock screen was a wall of notifications. Texts from friends he hadn't talked to in years. Emails from reporters. A Google alert that made his stomach drop. Breaking the boardroom bedroom. Serafina Sterling's secret affair exposed. Don't, Jamal said sharply as Sarah reached for her phone. Sarah, you don't want to... Give it to me, she snapped. She snatched the phone from his hand. Jamal watched the color drain from her face. Oh my God, she whispered. It was a hit piece, and a deadly one. The article from a notorious financial tabloid painted a lurid story. While Sterling Dynamics stock plummeted and thousands of employees feared for their jobs, CEO Serafina Sterling was shacked up in a suburban rental with disgraced lead architect Jamal Carter. There were photos. Grainy telephoto shots of Sarah stepping into Jamal's house 3 nights ago, soaked and disheveled. Another of them huddled together in the Maybach, heads bent over the laptop, framed to look intimate, not urgent. The worst was from last night. Through the gap in the kitchen curtains, Sarah in Jamal's lap, arms around his neck. The caption read, "Golden parachutes and lovers' embraces. Is this the end of the Sterling legacy?" He was watching us, Sarah whispered. Arthur, he didn't just hack the system. He had someone on your street. He's controlling the story, Jamal said, scanning the text. He's claiming I sabotaged the code to extort the company and seduced you to cover it up. He's painting you as... He swallowed. As someone who lost control. He's shredding my credibility, Sarah said, pacing the small kitchen. The board meets at 9. If they see this, they won't care about embezzlement. They'll toss me for moral turpitude before I get a word out. The stock's already down another 8% pre-market. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy pounding rattled the front door. Miss Sterling, we know you're in there, a voice called. Do you have a comment on the resignation rumors? Jamal peered through the blinds. It's a zoo, he muttered. At least 10 reporters crowded his tiny lawn, trampling the azaleas he'd tried and failed to keep alive. Cameras pointed at every window. A news van blocked the driveway. I have to go, Sarah said suddenly. She snatched up her purse, keys, blazer. The comfortable hoodie hit the floor. The armor came back on. What? No, you can't walk into that mess. I have to distance myself from you, she said, words tumbling. If I leave now, I can issue a statement. I can say I was here on business, that you're just a consultant. Sarah, stop, Jamal said, catching her arm. Let me go, Jamal. She tried to yank free, but he held on. Don't you see? I'm poison. I bring chaos. Look at your life. You were a quiet, normal dad. Now you've got paparazzi on your lawn and your face online. I'm destroying you. You're not destroying me, he said. I am, she insisted. I'm dangerous to be around. My father was right. I ruin things. I can't let Arthur win, and I can't drag you under with me. You have Zuri to think about. At the mention of his daughter, Jamal went still. He glanced down the hallway. Somehow Zuri was still asleep. He looked back at Sarah. She was shaking. She wasn't afraid of losing money. She was afraid of hurting him. You're right, Jamal said slowly. I do have Zuri to think about. Sarah sagged, the fight draining out of her. I'll tell the press I fired you, she said. It'll clear your name. You can go back to being... I'm not finished, Jamal cut in, voice dropping. She closed her mouth. I have Zuri to think about, he said. And do you know what I teach my little black girl in this world? I teach her you don't run from bullies and you don't leave your people stuck in the mud. He let go of her arm and crossed to the counter. He picked up the hard drive with the obsidian ledger, then his phone. What are you doing? Sarah asked. Calling Oaks, Jamal said, shrugging on his jacket. To bring the car around, she asked. To get me to the office? To get us to the office, he corrected. Jamal, you can't walk into that boardroom. Her laugh was bitter. You're the disgraced lover. They'll eat you alive. Let them laugh, Jamal said. Arthur thinks this is a PR game. He thinks it's about headlines. He forgot one thing. What? He forgot I built the system he's trying to steal, Jamal said, eyes going cold. And I know exactly how to burn it down around him. He raised the hard drive between them. I'm not going as your boyfriend, Sarah, and I'm not going as your employee. I'm going as a whistleblower, and I'm bringing the federal government with me. For the first time in days, the panic in her eyes sparked into something else. Something like fire. Go wake Zuri, Jamal said, taking command in a way no one ever did with Serafina Sterling. Pack a bag. We're going to a meeting. The conference room on the 40th floor of Sterling Dynamics Tower was sealed tight against the storm outside. But inside, the pressure was about to blow the windows out. 12 board members sat around the mahogany table, a jury in expensive suits. At the head sat Arthur Kane, tie straight, smile smug. At the far end sat Serafina Sterling. She looked small and tired. Her hands were folded in her lap, knuckles white. The motion is on the floor, Arthur said, voice dripping with rehearsed sympathy. To remove Serafina Sterling as CEO due to gross misconduct and negligence. We have the photos. We have the falling stock. It is regrettable. Just sign the papers, Arthur, Sarah said quietly. I'll resign. Leave the staff out of it. The staff will be restructured regardless, Arthur replied, smiling wider. Efficiency, my dear. He raised his hand. All in favor? Hands rose around the table. 1, 2, 5. Arthur lifted his own. That's a majority. Bam! The double doors didn't open. They slammed back against the stops like a gunshot. Every head spun toward the entrance. It wasn't security. It was Jamal Carter. He stood in the doorway in jeans, a damp hoodie, and the kind of expression that suggested he would happily tear the building down brick by brick. At his side, holding his hand in a bright yellow raincoat and clutching a stitched-up rabbit, was Zuri. Security! Arthur barked, shooting to his feet. Who let this man in? I let myself in, Jamal said, voice calm but carrying, and I brought the SEC with me. They're downstairs seizing your server room. I told them to give me 5 minutes first. The SEC, a board member whispered. Why? Jamal walked farther into the room. He didn't look at Sarah yet. He went straight for Arthur. He set the hard drive down in the center of the gleaming table with a solid thunk. Because of Obsidian Corp, he said. Arthur's face went the color of ash. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Jamal plugged the hard drive into the presentation cable. The massive screen behind Arthur flickered to life, not with a PowerPoint, but with a bank ledger. This, Jamal said to the board, is a transaction log. For 6 months, code patches authorized by Arthur Kane were followed by transfers, 0.5% of the operating budget, diverted to a shell account in the Cayman Islands under the name Obsidian. Numbers glowed red on the screen. Millions. And here, Jamal continued, pointing to a line, is the timestamp for the logic bomb that nearly destroyed this company 3 days ago. He hit a key. A map popped up. It was authorized from IP address 192.168.1.14. He tapped again, switching views. That, Jamal said, is the Wi-Fi network of the Four Seasons penthouse suite where Mr. Kane is currently staying. Silence fell. The only sound was the soft whir of the projector. Arthur laughed, thin and brittle. This is absurd. He's a disgruntled employee, the one sleeping with the CEO. He fabricated this. Jamal finally turned to Sarah. She was staring at him, eyes wide, hand over her mouth. He looked back at this board. You want to talk about the affair? He asked. He shifted Zuri higher on his hip. She tucked her face into his neck, overwhelmed by the room full of strangers. My daughter had pneumonia, Jamal said, his voice cracking just a touch. I was a single father, drowning in work, about to walk away because I couldn't keep her safe and keep this company afloat. Serafina Sterling didn't seduce me. She got in a car in the middle of a storm, drove my sick child to the hospital, sat in a plastic chair in the ER, and sewed the ear back on this rabbit because my daughter was crying. He looked each board member in the eye, one by one. She didn't act like a CEO, he said softly. She acted like a leader. And more than that, she acted like a human being. While Arthur Kane was trying to burn this place down for a payout, Sarah was saving my family. So you tell me, who do you want running this company? This is preposterous, Arthur shrieked, lunging for the laptop. Turn it off. Sit down, Arthur. The chairwoman, a gray-haired woman named Eliana, rose to her feet. Her voice flashed steel. Security, Elena said into the intercom. Please escort Mr. Kane to the lobby. The federal agents are waiting for him. 2 large guards stepped in. Arthur sputtered legal threats as they hauled him out. No one listened. When the door shut, the silence that followed was different. Not heavy, cleansed. Elena, the chairwoman said, turning to Sarah, I believe we have a vote to rescind. Sarah stood slowly. Instead of looking at the board, she walked straight to Jamal and Zuri. You stayed, she whispered. Ah, I told you, Jamal said, exhausted but lighter than he'd felt in years. I don't quit on family. This time she didn't hesitate. In front of the board, in front of the frozen bank ledger, she stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't glamorous. It tasted like coffee and rain and too many sleepless nights. It was real. When they broke apart, Zuri tugged on Sarah's sleeve. Miss Sarah, she said, can we go home now? I'm hungry. Sarah laughed, a bright, genuine sound that startled the board. Yes, Zuri, she said, wiping a tear from her cheek. Let's go home. Meeting adjourned, Elena said, smiling. 6 months later, the Queen Anne house looked different. The peeling paint had been touched up. The wild lawn was now a neat garden, thanks to Oaks, who turned out to have a secret love of horticulture. Inside, the kitchen was still messy, but it was a happy mess. Crumbs on the counter, magnets on the fridge, crayons in a jar. Jamal sat at the table with his laptop open. He wasn't working until 4 a.m. anymore. As Chief Technology Officer of Sterling Dynamics, he worked from home 4 days a week and logged off when his hours were done. The back door opened. I'm home, Sarah called. She stepped into the kitchen in jeans and a Sterling Dynamics hoodie 2 sizes too big. No power suit, no armor. She dropped her keys on the counter and bent to kiss the top of Jamal's head. How's the new encryption protocol? Solid as a rock, he'd said. How was the board meeting? Boring without you there to yell at everyone, she teased. She grabbed a juice box from the fridge. Daddy! Miss Sarah! Zuri barreled into the room in a tutu and rain boots, her favorite combo. Look! She held up a drawing. 3 stick figures stood in front of a square house. One tall with glasses, Jamal. One with long black hair, Sarah. and a small one holding a rabbit. Above them, in bright crayon, she had written, "Family." Sarah stared at the page. Her throat tightened. She'd spent her whole life stacking skyscrapers and chasing numbers, convinced that was what legacy looked like. Power had always felt like the only shield. She looked at Jamal, the man who had pushed back, fought for her, and loved her when she was just a tired woman in a ruined blouse. She looked at Zuri, the little black girl who'd taught her how to stitch a heart back together. She realized she'd been wrong. This, crayon lines on cheap paper, this was the only legacy that mattered. "It's perfect, little bit," Sarah said, voice thick. "We're putting this right on the fridge." "Right in the middle," Jamal agreed, pulling Sarah onto his lap as Zuri scrambled up onto the chair beside them. Outside, the Seattle rain started again, tapping gently against the window. Inside, it was warm. The coffee was hot. Zuri giggled as Mr. Hops danced across the table. And for the first time in all three of their lives, everything felt exactly where it was supposed to be. What a journey. From a desperate resignation email typed at 4 a.m. to a boardroom showdown that saved a legacy, Jamal and Serafina proved that sometimes hitting rock bottom is just the foundation for building something better. They showed that a job is only a job, but family, whether the one you're born into or the one you choose, is everything. If this story touched your heart, or if you've ever dreamed of quitting your job in a blaze of glory, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. And share this video with someone who needs a reminder that even in the darkest storms, there's always a way home. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.